Ethan Walker had always believed in the power of building something together. When he and Lauren started Walker & Company, it had been nothing more than an idea, a gamble they took together. Long nights, empty bank accounts, and relentless hustle had turned it into something real, a thriving consulting firm, respected, profitable, and poised for expansion. He had always thought of it as a symbol of their shared ambition, proof that their marriage wasn't just love, it was a partnership. For years, that belief sustained him. Every late night spent at the office, every business trip, every sacrifice, it was all for them, for their future. Lauren had been right there beside him, pitching ideas, closing deals, celebrating victories. Their success was their success. Or so he thought. It started with a feeling. A small thing at first, Lauren had been distant, more engaged in work than usual, spending extra hours in meetings Ethan hadn't been invited to. It wasn't unusual for her to take the lead on certain accounts, but something about her recent behavior set off an alarm in his mind. Emails were being guarded. Conversations would stop the moment he walked into a room. When he asked, she waved it off with that easy confidence she had always carried, reassuring him that everything was fine. Ethan trusted her. He had no reason not to. Until the night that changed everything. He had stayed late at the office, long after most employees had gone home. The soft hum of the city outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was a familiar comfort as he sorted through financial statements. A routine task, something he had done 1,000 times before, but that night, he wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way the numbers didn't add up. And then he saw it. A thread of emails buried under company reports, flagged for review but never officially sent to him. At first, the subject lines seemed like standard business communications, negotiations, client discussions, legal approvals. But the more he read, the more the words on the screen felt like a noose tightening around his throat. Lauren had been negotiating a sale. Not a deal, not a merger, not a partnership. She was selling everything. Walker & Company, their life's work, the company with both of their names on the door, she was preparing to sign it away. Ethan's pulse pounded as he scrolled through the thread, his hands tightening into fists. The deal wasn't just in the early stages, it was almost final. The sale was set to close in 3 days. And then he saw the worst of it. One name kept appearing in the emails. Jason Reed. A sleek, smooth-talking investor who had been hanging around their firm for months, offering guidance on expansion strategies. Ethan had never liked him, but Lauren had insisted he was valuable, that his connections could push them into the next level of business. But this wasn't just business. Lauren wasn't just selling the company. She was selling him out. There was a mention of assets, a breakdown of the financials. Ethan noticed something off. His name was missing. Lauren's name was still there, alongside Jason's, but Ethan, the man who had built this company with her, had been erased. The emails made it clear, the money from the sale was meant for Lauren and Jason. There were discussions about what they would do after. The words on the screen burned into his brain. A fresh start. A new venture. A different life. Ethan's stomach turned. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a hostile takeover. For a long moment, Ethan sat there, the glow of the monitor illuminating his clenched jaw, his narrowed eyes. His mind raced through every moment, every decision, every sign he had ignored. The missed calls, the unexplained business trips, the way she had started treating him more like an obstacle than a partner. He had convinced himself that she was just under stress, that their business was consuming too much of their personal lives. But now he saw the truth laid bare in the cold, undeniable evidence in front of him. Lauren had planned everything. She was going to walk away with his company, his future, and another man. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his hands to relax. His vision was clear now. The rage that had sparked in his chest wasn't blind, it was sharp. Controlled. She thought she had won. She thought he was clueless, that he would walk into that boardroom in 3 days, sign the paperwork like a fool, and hand over his life without a fight. But Lauren had underestimated him. And that was her biggest mistake. Ethan's hands hovered over the keyboard, his breath slow and steady, but his heart hammered like a war drum in his chest. The emails had been a warning shot, but now he needed proof, real, undeniable evidence that would expose everything. He moved methodically, sifting through every file Lauren had touched in the last 6 months. It didn't take long for the cracks in the foundation to appear. The financial records weren't just messy, they were manipulated. There were discrepancies in expense reports, fabricated losses, and exaggerated operational costs that painted an ugly picture, a picture that made it look like Ethan was the one driving the company into the ground. Every falsified document was crafted with precision. Lauren had carefully orchestrated the numbers to create a slow but steady decline, an illusion of mismanagement. To an outsider, it would appear that Ethan was careless, irresponsible, unfit to lead. The board, the investors, the buyers, they would have no reason to question the sale. Lauren hadn't just betrayed him, she had built a case against him. Ethan's fingers curled into fists as he forced himself to keep going. This wasn't an accident. The deception was too precise, too well planned. She had been setting this up for months. And then, the second blow landed. Jason Reed wasn't just involved in the sale, he was deep in it. Ethan traced the transactions, following a trail of subtle but damning financial movements. Jason had been funding small parts of their business for months, his money funneled into the company under vague, investment terms. But this wasn't investment, it was positioning. Lauren had been shifting power to him. Ethan's name had been gradually removed from key contracts. The accounts he had once overseen were being quietly restructured. The entire sale was designed to make him obsolete. Lauren wasn't just leaving. She was cutting him out of his own empire. He sat back, exhaling slowly, trying to steady himself as the weight of it all pressed against his chest. 3 days. In 72 hours, Lauren and Jason would finalize the deal. They would shake hands with the buyers, sign the papers, and walk away. And Ethan? He would have nothing. Lauren had planned this down to the last detail. She had crafted the downfall of her own husband. Ethan clenched his jaw, pushing away the storm of emotions threatening to consume him. There was no time for rage. No time for grief. He needed to act. He saved everything, copies of emails, financial records, contracts. If Lauren thought she had buried her tracks, she was wrong. Every document she had manipulated, every decision she had made in the shadows, Ethan now had it all. At home, Lauren carried on like nothing was happening. She greeted him with a soft smile, kissed his cheek as she passed him in the hallway, talked about their future like she wasn't already making plans to disappear. She was too comfortable. Too confident. She played the role perfectly, the supportive wife, the dedicated business partner. She laughed at dinner, sent him texts throughout the day, even mentioned how stressful work had been lately. Ethan watched her, studied every move, every word, every lie. She thought he was clueless. She thought he would walk blindly into the trap. Lauren had no idea that the moment she had turned on him, she had made herself his opponent. She had started a war. And Ethan had already decided how it would end. Ethan moved with purpose. He had spent the night collecting every shred of evidence, his mind racing with calculations and strategies. Every betrayal, every deception, every carefully laid trap Lauren had set, he would turn it against her. At dawn, he picked up his phone. His lawyer, Daniel Pierce, had been with him since the early days of Walker and Company. There was no one he trusted more. The moment Daniel answered, Ethan laid everything out, the falsified reports, the secret negotiations, the financial manipulations. Within minutes, the course of action was clear. The first move was swift and precise. Their founding agreement contained a clause that Lauren had clearly forgotten, a power transfer provision meant to protect the business in case of sudden leadership disputes. The clause allowed one partner to seize full control if the other was found guilty of financial misconduct. And Lauren had left a trail of it. By the time the sun had fully risen, her shares were gone. The company, in every legal sense, now belonged solely to Ethan. The second move was just as ruthless. Ethan's financial expert stepped in, freezing every account linked to Lauren. The money she had planned to take, the millions she had schemed for, was locked down. Not a single cent would be leaving the company without Ethan's approval. The third move was the one that would deliver the final blow. Ethan finalized the sale. The same deal Lauren had secretly orchestrated, the same agreement she thought she would sign alongside Jason, it was now his. Lauren and Jason were walking into a meeting expecting to strip Ethan of everything. Instead, they were about to find out that they had nothing left. The moment he finished signing the paperwork, a calm settled over him. Not the numbness of shock, nor the burn of betrayal, this was pure, unwavering control. Lauren had spent months plotting his downfall. And Ethan had dismantled it in a single day. Friday arrived. Ethan dressed the part. A navy blue suit, crisp and sharp. The kind of suit a winner wears. As he walked into the boardroom, he saw them, Lauren and Jason, sitting at the long mahogany table, smug and self-assured. They had no idea the ground had already crumbled beneath them. Lauren's eyes flickered with confidence, her posture poised, ready to take everything. Jason leaned back in his chair, smirking, certain that Ethan was walking into his own execution. They had no idea. Not yet. The tension in the boardroom was palpable, thick enough to strangle the air from the room. Lauren sat at the head of the table, a picture of composed arrogance, her fingers lightly tapping against the polished wood. Across from her, Jason exuded that same quiet confidence, his usual smirk lingering at the corner of his mouth. Ethan watched them in silence. They thought they had won. Lauren slid the stack of legal documents toward him, the weight of the pages a symbol of the final nail in the coffin she believed she had built for him. The agreement had been crafted to ensure that Ethan signed away his rights, his power, his name. Jason leaned back, arms crossed, already settling into the role of a man who had conquered his competition. Ethan didn't rush. He reached for the papers with measured precision, flipping through each page, taking his time, letting them feel the illusion of control for just a little longer. Then, with the same quiet confidence, he placed an entirely different set of documents on the table. Lauren's fingers hesitated as she reached for them, her expression shifting slightly, barely perceptible, but Ethan saw it. That first flicker of uncertainty. She read the first line. Then the second. Ethan watched as her face drained of color. She flipped frantically through the pages, her perfectly manicured nails catching on the edges, her breathing suddenly uneven. The shares she thought she controlled. Gone. The accounts she planned to drain. Locked. The deal she had orchestrated. Signed, but by Ethan, as the sole owner. Jason straightened in his chair, eyes darting across the papers, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His smirk vanished. He muttered something under his breath, his voice hoarse, the first crack in his composure appearing. Lauren's hands trembled as she reached for the final page, her gaze darting toward Ethan. This wasn't possible. The business that she had spent months preparing to steal, the future she had envisioned with Jason, the entire empire she thought she had secured, was no longer hers. Ethan had taken everything back. Lauren's lips parted, her disbelief turning to desperation as she grasped for something, anything, that would undo what had just happened. Jason shifted uncomfortably, the full realization of his mistake settling in. He had backed the wrong horse. His investment in Lauren, his assurances that they would walk away with everything, had collapsed in an instant. Ethan remained still, watching as the weight of the situation crushed them. Lauren tried to speak, to demand an explanation, to protest the impossible reality she was now trapped in, but there was nothing left to say. Ethan had already won. The moment the reality of her loss settled in, Lauren panicked. The carefully composed mask she had worn throughout the entire meeting fractured instantly. Her breathing turned shallow, her hands curled into fists against the table, and the confidence she had walked in with vanished. She begged first. Her voice, once so steady and calculated, took on an unfamiliar edge, desperate, pleading. She reached for reasoning, tried to spin the narrative. There had to be some way to salvage the deal, to find a loophole, a missed technicality that would undo what had just happened. But there wasn't. She scrambled for the contract again, her eyes darting across the pages, looking for something, anything, that could prove she still had a claim to the company. The legal jargon blurred as she flipped through the paperwork, her fingers trembling. Jason remained unervingly silent beside her. His initial frustration had shifted to something colder, detachment. He was already pulling away. Lauren's panic twisted into rage. She turned defensive, spitting accusations, threats. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claiming that Ethan had no right to cut her out, that she had built this company just as much as he had. Ethan had been waiting for this. Calmly, methodically, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out one final document. He set it down in front of her with a quiet, deliberate motion. Lauren hesitated before reaching for it. The moment she started reading, her face drained of color. It was all there, every wire transfer, every off-the-books transaction, every falsified expense report. The offshore account she had been funneling company funds into, the illegal financial movements disguised as operational costs, irrefutable proof of her fraud. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. This wasn't just about losing the company anymore. This was criminal. Lauren's breath hitched, her fingers tightening around the edges of the paper. If she had any illusions about fighting this, about reclaiming any part of her former life, they were gone. The penalty? Federal fraud charges. Jason's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. His silence had been growing heavier by the second, and now it was suffocating. He didn't look at Lauren. There was no parting remark, no attempt to defend her, no grandstand. Just quiet, brutal abandonment. He had backed the wrong woman. He had attached himself to what he thought was a winning strategy, a golden investment that would make him richer. But in the end, Lauren wasn't an asset, she was a liability. And Jason never held on to dead weight. Without a word, he walked out, leaving her alone in the wreckage of everything she had destroyed. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching as the realization of true defeat finally crushed her. The company? Gone. The money? Untouchable. Jason? Already moving on. There was no escape from this. She tried one last time, her lips parting as if she was about to say something, maybe a plea, maybe an excuse. Ethan gave her nothing. The meeting was over. As he stood, the weight that had been pressing on his shoulders for months finally lifted. Lauren had spent so much time plotting to take everything from him. And now? She was walking away with nothing. The business was his. The truth was on his side. And Lauren? She was just a failed investment.